What's up, team? Welcome to another episode of the Master Your Craft Study. A few announcements quick before we get started. First of all, I'm getting married on April 28th. So if you don't hear from me, or if the Master Your Craft Study skips a week in the podcast output, I hope you can understand. The editing and the background stuff that it takes to put one of these out still takes a long time for me. I kind of just taught myself. I'm not a video expert. I'm not an audio expert. I'm definitely not a tech expert. But I understand the power that it has in our world today, and so I'm teaching myself. It just so happens to take a little bit longer, and with the busy week coming up, myself and some of my best friends are going up to the mountains in North Carolina to do some hiking for my bachelor party, and then of course, on April 28th, I get to be made the most joyful man on this planet. So until that point, I'm going to be a little bit swamped. If you don't hear from me, I hope you can understand. Once the wedding's done, we should be able to have our website and blog up and running. And of course, we already do our social accounts at the MYC team on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that jazz. All right, on to our guest. She was the number 1 draft pick in the 2005 WNBA draft. She was an idol of mine growing up. She actually went to my high school, so I was able to see her play a little bit from time to time. And some of her coaches, and I can attest to this, call her one of the most competitive people they've ever seen. She's got a non-traditional story, playing on a concrete patch that they put a basketball hoop on in her backyard in Wisconsin, out by a farm. She's one of the most accomplished basketball players in Wisconsin history, having played in a state championship, going on to the University of Minnesota and playing in a Final Four in college. Then in the WNBA, won a championship and also won a EuroLeague championship playing overseas, which for those of you that don't know, the EuroLeague is essentially the European equivalent to the NBA and WNBA. She is one of the most versatile players to ever play the game. And yes, she is still playing. As she says, the game keeps calling her. She's going on her 14th season as a professional basketball player. I actually made the mistake early in this interview, and you'll hear it, where I said she's been playing for 14 years since high school. But the truth is she's been playing for 14 years since college. She's a seasoned vet. She knows the game, its ups, its downs, the good sides, the bad sides, and she's full of wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Janel McCarville. Janelle, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jacob.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. 13, 14 years since you've graduated high school and you're still playing professionally. That is the definition of longevity in a basketball career. Tell us a little bit about that and why you're still playing. You obviously love the game.
I do love the game. I think I've tried to retire a few times in the last couple of years, but it just never worked out. The game kind of kept calling me. This last year, I played on a team in Sweden, which allowed me to get my foot in the door for coaching. So that's kind of why I've been, on the upkeep with playing and everything like that. And it's kind of been great trying to take that next step after basketball, while still enjoying the basketball life that I have.
That's really cool. Those of you that don't know this, and I talked about it a little bit in the intro, but this is an extra special episode for me. And I've said this to Janelle before in our conversation before we started the actual recording. But Janelle went to the same high school that I did, or I went to Janelle's high school, I should be saying. And she was an idol of mine, unbelievable player growing up, and actually wound up being the number 1 pick in the WNBA draft. Janelle, when that started to transpire and you started to realize that you were going to be a really good player, whether it be midway through your middle school years or high school years, what was it that clicked for you where you kind of started to think, wow, I can do something with this basketball thing? What was your mindset at that time? And how old were you when that happened?
Man, well, I will say it was not middle school and junior high that it hit me that I could play. I wasn't very good, to be honest, in elementary and junior. It kind of just developed as the years went on, and I just had belief in myself. And one thing that never really happened is I didn't do a lot of camps. I didn't go to a lot of camps. I didn't spend a lot of money on basketball. It was all stuff that was learned on the farm, playing out against my barns. And I think I had a piece of concrete that was maybe 10 feet wide by 30 feet long, and I put a hoop at the end of it. And that was where a lot of the work, was put in behind closed doors when nobody actually saw. But then it wasn't until sophomore year that I started getting recruited more and more. And I think, even then I didn't know that professionally I would have a chance to extend my career. I was just going for college, which allowed me to get,
Yeah.
a few offers here and there, and finally ended up choosing the University of Minnesota, where, 4 great years happened and we had a great Final Four run. So, all these things happened that I never even expected basketball to take me to, but been, excited ever since.
Yeah, that's neat. What about when I say the word sacrifice? Obviously, being a sophomore in high school, junior in high school, you realize you were a really good player. You start getting scholarship offers throughout the course of college. Your draft status or your ability to, or your mindset around the idea of playing professionally grew over time. What did that mean in terms of sacrifice? What did you have to give up? What kind of things, socially or family wise, did you have to change to start pursuing that career at that high of a level?
The word sacrifice, that means a lot, actually. Going to college and having to give and devote all your time for basketball and then academics as well, it doesn't leave a lot of time for friends, family, social life. So truthfully, sacrifice means almost everything up until basketball. You're up for morning practices start at 6, so you're up at 5. Practices go maybe an hour, so you're there till 7. Shower, change. University starts after that at 9. Go midway, throughout the day, off and on with courses. To only come back to practice in the afternoon. 2-hour practice in the afternoon. Weights after. Homework after that. You're exhausted. There's really not a lot of time for, friends outside of basketball and family. So when you say sacrifice, I think, all the time that I had to miss away from friends and family here in Stevens Point and in Minneapolis when I played.
Yeah,
But
no, that's definitely. I'm not sure there are any athletes that don't understand what the word sacrifice means by the time they're done, especially.
I'm sure the athletes get it. Friends and family, I don't think they fully comprehend what kind of sacrifices have to be made in order for you to have such a successful career.
Did you feel like friends and family were at a distance after you deciding to make these pursuits? I mean, I guess I already know the answer to that. The answer is obviously yes, but what kind of impact did that have on your life, having to basically say, hey, I'm going to chase this dream, and I hope that you understand? I mean, are there a lot of people that didn't quite get that sort of lifestyle?
Yes, I would say at first, but once they saw the success that came with it, I don't think anybody ever questioned whether or not it was the right choice or the right decision. It just had to stay in my mindset that it was the right decision as well, because yes, the first year away from family is tough, but it doesn't get any easier necessarily after that, because year 2, 3, 4, 5, they just kind of add on to being away from family, away from friends. In the professional ranks, you go over for the women, we go overseas, roughly from anywhere from August, September, October to April, May. And, that's a solid block of time that your family doesn't get to see you and you don't get to see them, and you're on different time zones and it's 7 hours ahead. When I played in Russia, I was 12 hours ahead. So basically on opposite sides of the world, trying to communicate and still live our lives. But, the few friends and all family that I still have definitely understood what I was in for, and we did the best to communicate when we could and how we could. Now with social media and Snapchat and all these new devices, Skype, you're able to stay in contact with family and keep it more relatable. So it makes it easier now. I will say that for sure. But, I don't think I ever thought about it back then, what it would be like if I was able to see my family on a daily basis.
I think that's a strong proponent of someone who's pursuing craft mastery, which is what the show is all about, is that, and you mentioned it, there's a gap between maybe you're 17 years old and you start taking the game of basketball really seriously. It's not for another 6 years, essentially, that you become the number 1 pick in the WNBA draft. Now, it's easy for people once that happens to say, oh, well, I understand Janelle's commitment. I understand why she spends so much time on this game. Look, it's paying off. But what a lot of people probably need to understand is that commitment to excellence probably doesn't come with reward for months, years, a decade down the line. And people have to understand that commitment to craft mastery is a personal choice. You don't do it to be the number one pick necessarily. You're doing it because you see an avenue for you to pursue excellence. And that's a result of that pursuit. And I think you kind of embody that. That's something that you didn't quit on it. We grew up in the same town, and it's not necessarily conducive to athletes taking that sort of an avenue for adventure or sporting pursuit. I mean, there's just not a lot of other athletes around that you can relate to or that can mentor you. Most of the time people are involved in a different sort of lifestyle, and it's hard for people to understand. But that's really, I think that's important for people to understand. It's not always going to be easy. You have to be able to have that single-minded pursuit to be able to go get it, which leads me to my next question. So obviously there's sacrifice. Tell me about some of and it can be personal, it can be general. Paint the picture or tell me some stories about things you struggled with. Tell me, everyone talks about the success. We know that that's there. We know that you fought through the struggles that you had. Tell me about some struggles or fears or anxieties that you had to deal with throughout that process.
Well, 14 years, that's a lot of struggles. You know, it's hard to pinpoint it right now, but, you know, there's in the basketball terms of it, there's performance slumps, you know, if you don't mesh well with teams. Essentially going overseas, we are put on a new team every single year in a different country. So you have to understand that there's language barriers, there's cultural barriers. You know, I've been on teams when I played in China. Not one person on the team spoke English. Oh. My translator, you know, spoke 75 to 80% English, and I didn't get one sub. So I had to play 40 minutes, and, you know, it was just differences. So China was difficult in the aspect of I was so alone and so sheltered because I could only speak to one person in the country other than, you know, the other Americans when we see them. But in my team, only one person spoke English, like I said, and she was the translator. So I had to basically call her on a daily basis and find everything out. I got coaches in a timeout, 2-minute timeout. She looked at me and yelled at me for 1 minute and 30 seconds straight. I looked at the translator and said, "What'd she say?" "Shoot more, score more. Don't pass the ball." After 1 minute and 30 seconds of being yelled at, you know, so like in the basketball terms, there's lots of up and downs, whether your performance, you know, it's a business. So they obviously want you to perform at the highest level. And if you don't do that, they're ready to kind of push you out the door a little bit and bring in somebody who will. So the constant pressure that's always there is, you know, is pretty high.
That's a good one. You just identified that. So, okay, let's talk about that. Because I've talked to a couple people that play professionally, and they talk about how their first couple of years, they have a different mindset because you're not quite expecting the level of business behind it once you become a professional in your sport. How did you deal with that pressure? Like, what helped you? We've all had, as players, we all know that there are times when you struggle, your game's not on, you're not playing as well. And that pressure is constantly there. How did you deal with it?
Well, early in my career, I've kind of developed a knack or a niche for my own personal game where it's pretty much all around. I'm not just a scorer, just a rebounder, just a passer, just a defender. You know, I think I don't excel at all of those areas, but I work my ass off in all of those areas to create a solid player. You know, my one-on-one ability is not necessarily where it should be at, but you put me together with 4 other players who have good basketball knowledge and nobody can guard me. You know, it's just, I can understand that, and I've created that situation for me.
You found your identity as
yes,
a player.
Yes. If you need me to score, I'll score. If you need me to pass, like, I feel there's nobody better in the WNBA or overseas who can pass better than me. Point guards, maybe, you know, but from position 2, 3, 4, and 5, no.
Hey, you're speaking to me here, Janelle. You got to be a point forward, a point center. That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. So, you know, like I created that, and I understand that. You know, so I never really I didn't pigeonhole myself in the aspect of only having one craft mastered. I try to do it all in order to, you know, be a complete player.
Your craft could probably be identified as versatility. I mean, that was something that was important to you, is being good at multiple facets of the game. That's really solid.
Yes.
Who along your journey, and it's okay if a lot of this stuff are things that you had to figure out on your own. That's how a lot of people are. But usually there's some sort of influence. If it's personal, that's best. If it is just more of an idol or a hero that's already on the national stage, that's cool too. But who are the mentors or heroes that played a role in your life that kind of helped you when you were struggling, that helped you identify what tools and keys there would be for you to have success?
Um, I would say family. Mother and father kind of set the guidelines and set the foundation. My mother was a woman of all trades, basically. She pretty much rebuilt my whole house from the inside out. My father worked far away, so she had to handle all the kids while he was gone. So she was mother and father at times, yet still, maintained that loving, nurturing mother character. And then father set the tone, saying, you commit to something, you have to follow through on it. He worked in Milwaukee while we lived in Stevens Point.
So
He
2.5 hour drive for people that don't know, or 3 with traffic.
Yes. And on top of that, this is 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So he didn't always travel. So he had an apartment where he would live Monday through Friday, and I would only see him for Saturday and Sunday. So for 18 years, he got that the year I was born, and he retired the year I was a senior, which allowed him to travel to all my games. So my mom and dad, my senior year from college, or from high school, senior year from high school, they made every game that they could from senior year of high school on, all because of how my father, had it planned out. So again, the foundation that him and my mother laid obviously set my foundation.
That's incredible. Your childhood, your foundation it almost like directly bleeds into your basketball career. That's not that common. A lot of people that wind up being good at a sport almost do it in spite of their upbringing. You hear the stories, the rags to riches stuff all the time. And that's obviously sometimes more of a financial take on it, but really people tend to escape. I mean, people tend to use basketball as an outlet. It sounds to me like some of your foundation and your family principles are something that were very important to maintain while you were a player.
Mm-hmm.
What about coaches or teammates? Whether they were some people that you were really close with or people you just look up to, who give me a person or tell me a story about someone that impacted your life in the game of basketball specifically.
Put me on the spot on this one. I would say, she didn't necessarily affect it in a grand scheme or a big way at one point. It's just consistently. And it would be Lindsay Whalen that I played with 3 years at the University of Minnesota and a few years in the WNBA. And just, her consistency, watching her grow as a point guard. She came from a small town in Minnesota that, people probably thought she wouldn't amount to much, similar to me. And we found each other at the University of Minnesota and created something great together. And, I can remember back to the first day I saw her. She was nowhere, I never thought that she would become one of the best point guards in the history of the WNBA or world for that matter, playing on the U.S. team, winning gold medals. For me, she's just a friend, but just the drive and work ethic that she had, she pushed me to be better on a daily basis. And there was no quarreling between us. I don't think we ever had a disagreement about anything. She came to work, she brought her lunch pail and a hat to work every single day. And as her accolades grew, as my accolades grew, we never looked at it like that. We just kind of kept working together to try to create this awesome women's basketball atmosphere. Dynasty is a good way to put it. But no, you go back to college and we didn't know at that moment what we were doing, but we created, an outpouring for women's basketball in the state of Minnesota. Mm-hmm. We went from having 300 people in the stands to almost being sold out at Williams Arena on the University of Minnesota campus with 16 to 18,000 people per game.
Yep.
We averaged 12,000 my sophomore and junior year, and it's just, the work ethic that we had and that we created together really, set the tone for both of our careers in that aspect. And we just fed off each other.
It's crazy to think about the ripple effect too, because and at the time, you probably didn't understand it. You probably do now, especially where, as sad as it is, we are still in a time, and I'm a relentless optimist, right? So I feel like a little bit is better than nothing, but we still live in a time where women have to fight for equality and or the due perception that men have already. And you and Lindsay making the decision to try to be great has had a ripple effect on that, probably that entire city, and all of the youth basketball and all the little girls that are playing that might have thought, wow, look at this. They watch the stands grow. They see the excitement around the game. They see people like you going out there and playing with passion. And that ripple effect is based on the fact that you committed yourself to your craft. And I think that that's really, really important, because you probably weren't thinking about that when you and Lindsay would go to the gym and you're shooting around. The last thing you're thinking about is, hey, in 20 years, some 7-year-old that is watching us is going to wind up being a leader in her community or on her team because of this. But that's what happens when you commit yourself to something worthwhile, to a worthwhile pursuit.
Yep.
Which I think that's really, really neat. And you had an impact on me, but I also know that, especially as you grew at Minnesota, that probably has continued to be the case. Let's talk about this. You've played in state title, Final Four in college. You've been in WNBA finals. Those are massive moments.
Don't forget, I won a EuroLeague title as well in Europe.
Did not know that.
The top title, same as WNBA title, maybe a little bit bigger because more teams are involved.
So you've essentially played in the highest stakes games at every single level. How, the more you do it, the better you get at it. But how do you prepare for that? What sort of mindset or mindfulness or preparation goes into these massive moments?
I would say more preparation went in when I was younger. The lead up, like you said, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So being there more often than not gives you the preparation you need for it. I don't get nervous for big games or anything anymore, because for the most part, you got to understand, like you said, I haven't mastered. I'm mastering my craft.
That's right.
Where I do this every single day. That gym is no different than the gym I practice in now or a year ago or 2 years ago. An outdoor court, the hoop is still 10 feet high. The rim is still the same size, backboard, all that jazz. So for me, it's just the people who come to the games are the only thing that's really different. So to show up in a championship game or an exhibition game, I feel like I'm still going to give you everything I got in that game or that game, because to me, it's no difference. Yes, I might win a trophy at the end of one, but when the ball goes up and the 40 minutes are being played, everything is the same. So I'm not too awestruck by the moment, or, I try to live in the moment and take everything, soak it all in now, because you don't know when it's going to happen again.
I'll try to put it in the show notes. The person who said this quote, and I'm not doing them justice by not giving their name, but that reminds me of a quote that I hold pretty dear to my heart, that says, "The way you do anything is the way you do everything." And that's so true in the game of basketball and in any sport, just because if you're not approaching practice, you hear coaches talk about all the time, if you're not approaching practice or you're training the same way you'd approach a game, with the same level of intensity, passion, you're not going to be able to perform in those big moments. And you obviously have, because you keep coming back. You keep finding yourself in these scenarios where you're playing for a title. And that's the ultimate goal. That is, you said it best yourself. You said it's a growth thing. You're still mastering your craft. And so that approach to always wanting to be chasing that title and to be improving your game to get to that point is the reason why you keep getting back to that point. That's really, that's a really impressive thought pattern that a lot of kids and players and even coaches that I've encountered don't quite understand. There is no destination for this. You're constantly pursuing that.
Right.
And speaking of constantly, what sort of things for you are constants or routines that were part of your life, whether it be sleep or diet practices, superstition, mindset stuff? What sort of things for you are part of your life, part of your routine, that might be pointing to some of your success?
I would say I've gotten away from this a little bit, but I was very big on visualizing things. So when I would go to bed or I would have free time, I would get shots up in my head. As silly as it kind of sounds, I would,
Not silly.
think of form. Well, I don't know. I've never really told anybody that before. But that's what I would do. I would envision moves and be on the block with somebody guarding me, with the time winding down rather than actually acting it out. I'm visualizing it all. So next day when I get to the court, I got this cool move that I can do that I don't even know if I can really do it because I dreamt about it basically. And that's kind of how I created my game, is trial and error, doing a lot of the moves I do. With my size and everything, I probably shouldn't be able to do them, but because I believed and I put forth the effort, and I visualized, I created this, this awesome move for that matter that, people have never seen maybe. And, I think that kind of created me being hard to guard because I was unpredictable, and all because, I just, again, when I was younger, I visualized more than anything, shooting situations. As you get older and your level of team goes up, you prepare for late game special situations, but in high school, we didn't know about stuff like that. But I did it naturally, just thinking what I was going to do with 5 seconds left. If the ball was at half court and I had a little girl on me, how I would post up, and demand the ball from half court straight to me to go to work in the post, something like that. I really just try to envision and create these situations. And
it doesn't feel like it's the first time you've been there then.
Nope. So again, when it does happen, it's not the first time, which, it really helped me.
That's powerful. That's very powerful. Not a lot of people do that. It seems woo-woo. It seems
a lot of people walk into the gym and the first shot they shoot is a long distance 3-pointer that barely hits the rim.
Go make one.
My first shot is a layup, a form layup that just, puts everything into perspective on how you're going to be for the day. You're going to step into your shot. You're not going to fade away, fall away, lean to the left, right, things like that. It's just a nice form shot. And I usually do 5 or 6 of them back and forth around the rim, take a step back, 5 or 6, take a step back, and I just work my way out from the bucket with that. And that's another thing that I do, is make your first couple shots. Shooters like to see the ball go through the rim. Scorers like to see the ball go through the rim. If your first shot is a long distance 3 that doinks off and you got to chase it, 50 yards in the other direction because you missed so bad, that's not, as a scorer and a shooter, that's not something you want to start the day with.
No. Positive thought. Tell me about, I'm going to say one word and you can take it wherever you want. You can say,
I got to elaborate or just,
it can be whatever response you want. It can be a definition. It can be what the word means to you. It can be an example. It can be a story. Literally wherever your mind goes with it, just start talking about it.
Okay.
Grit.
Down and dirty, doing the dirty work that needs to be done to win games, win a possession. I think a lot of people think a game is won in the first play, and it's not. You got to break a game down into quarters, halves, 5 minutes, possessions. I think when you do that, you can look at any team and say, yes, this team might beat us, but they're not going to beat us every single possession, and they're going to have to earn this victory, whether it's easy or not. You got to bring the grit you have on defense, offense, pushing them, like I said, in order to make them earn the victory. Don't just give it to them. You got to, get dirty at certain possessions.
Yeah, absolutely. What do changing gears here just a little bit. And by the way, I asked everyone about grit. Grit is one of those interesting words to me. It's very ambiguous. It almost feels like everyone can point and say that was a gritty play or that's a gritty player. But you'll face this. You start coaching. The idea of trying to quantify it and to teach it is like, whoa, where does this come from? Why is a player gritty? It boils down to a lot of very deep background. But that's just a fascinating word to me. Shifting gears a little bit. Let's talk as briefly or as in depth as you want to go on this, depending on what kind of message you want to send or share. Athletes that use your platform for social issues. Do you think it's a duty? Do you think it's something that every athlete who's in the spotlight should do? Or do you think it's something that's personal? and what sort of things do you think need to be spoken about right now?
I don't think it's necessarily a duty. I think if you're educated on the situation and the topic, by all means, voice your opinion. And if people want to do it, they can. I've been a part of it. When a police officer shot and killed a man in Minneapolis, we came together and we were the first team to band together and put his name on the shirt and other names because it had happened a few times. So we had a couple different names on the shirts, and it caused kind of an uproar, and it was in social media. I think it was on First Take, Outside the Lines.
That's when you were playing for the Lynx, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, because it's a talking point. It's the same thing with the NFL players kneeling for the anthem. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it, it gets you talking, and communication and conversation hopefully leads to, a positive outcome. I'm sure neither group on any platform, whether they're arguing pro or con, wants to see, a confrontation, negative, words, physical altercations arise. But, some things need to be talked about.
Mm-hmm.
For Trump now, I think it's 50-50. People love him or they hate him, and there's really no in-between ground on what he's doing. So, it's just whether or not you agree or disagree with this. And
it's the conversation that's important. And the platform, at the very least, the platform that athletes are on could spark intelligent conversation about it. And that is important. I agree with you.
LeBron started a conversation the other day with a reporter, and the reporter shut him down and said, you should shut up and dribble basketball. Well, just because he didn't go to high school or college doesn't mean he's an uneducated man. He's done a lot. He's come from a tough place. He's overcome more than most people have. And for the most part, he's gotten more humble as his career's gone on.
As he's learned, he's taken coaching, he's taken advice, he's got good mentors.
Yes.
He's a businessman. People don't realize he's got his hand in all sorts of things. He's got media outlets. He's got all these different things he's doing on the side that are very intelligently, strategically placed businesses and business plans. And people take that stuff for granted. He's not just a basketball player.
No.
Nobody really is.
No. I mean, like you said, basketball is it's something that, we can do, but it doesn't necessarily separate us from, the average Joe in that aspect who goes to work for the 9 to 5. I couldn't do what they could do. They can't do what I can do, but we're not that different, really.
No. And there's no reason to treat anybody any differently because of that. Everyone's got their own expression of self.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just a couple more questions here. We're almost running out of time, but we're doing really good here. So, and this can be real quick, whether it be, everyone has their own form of media intake, whether it be books, music, TV, documentaries, movies. Give me some impactful media in your life, something that inspired you or who kind of changed your mind. Could be an album, could be, like I said, a book, TV show, anything like that.
A book, a TV show, magazine. Off the top of my head, Jacob, I can't say something that has impacted me. What
about music?
Music plays its own role. I think there is a time and place for almost every genre of music. I think I personally grew up on country western. Some Hank Williams, Gene Autry, some people have never even heard of, and I will listen to them. But pregame is not going to be country western. It's going to be, more rap and hip hop with the emotion and the blood pumping.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I've had a life changing or album that I would grasp dear to my heart. Nothing like that, really.
No, that's okay. I just asked just in case there's something that stands out, because what a lot of people listening to the show, especially players, coaches, and trainers, if there is one, which there might not be, but if there is one, it's easy for them to take away from that and say, oh, I'm going to go watch that. Someone might spit out your stereotypical Coach Carter or something like that, when it's like, oh,
yeah, I mean, you enjoy all the basketball moving.
Right.
Loving
You probably
basketball
like
back in
Hoosiers.
the day was the best when she left her hand up there and coach made her stand there holding her form. There's a couple situations
Classic.
like that. Coach Carter making them do the suicides. I think every
Yeah.
basketball player's probably been in those situations.
Yeah. And can
So
resonate with that.
all relatable.
Cool. How are athletes different than the general public? What does an athlete that has been through the ringer and has played for, let's say, all the way through high school at the very least, and at the most, all the way through 4 years of college or into a professional career, what does that person or that personality have that the general public does not, good or bad?
I would say they have team building skills, working abilities, group skills. A lot of people cannot always work in a group setting in the aspect of taking orders, giving orders, 50-50 being equal on something. The thing with basketball is it takes 5 people on the court to create something beautiful. At your job, it might only take you to create something beautiful. If you were put with 4 other people, you couldn't do that because you need to be alone to do it. Basketball, it allows you to be successful individually as well as collectively as a team. And most basketball teams have 10 to 12, 15 players on it. So it requires a lot of communication to set up defenses on the court, fast moving problem thinkers, which, defense is changing from man to zone. The offense has to come together in possession with a shot clock, say 30 seconds, and put together a play that they worked on 5 days ago to this specific defense. So I think basketball, in any sport for that matter, offers, problem solving, group work, and the ability to take peer leadership for that matter, from nobody older than you, just other teammates. It's not always leadership from the coach or boss for that matter. So that's definitely one, I would say.
Yeah, a lot of people have a guard up around getting advice or leadership from people in the same situation as them. It's almost like a sensitivity or an insecurity.
Yep.
I have not thought about that. That's really fascinating. Athletes have to do that consistently on a daily basis.
Yeah, and there's no talking back to the coach when he tells you what he thinks you should do, and you're like, yeah, but I think he's like he'll shut that down right there and say, no, you're gonna do what I said because I'm the coach, and that's what you gotta do. So again, you got to incorporate that into what you can and can't come back with.
Right.
Got to deal with.
Yeah, interesting. That's really good, Janelle. I've got one more question for you that we'll finish on, but I do want to say before we get to that, I think that there are young gals and guys all over the place that could really benefit from hearing more from you, and I mean that, whether it be on social or you doing your own conversational stuff one-on-one. I mean, your perspective is really incredible, especially being a journey person in the basketball world or in the sporting world. You've got a lot of tremendous knowledge on what it takes to handle this stuff. The pressure is immense, and it's almost like you just kind of shrug it off. It's a normal thing. And the perspective that you gain from that's pretty incredible. So that said, this is the last question, and everyone's has to leave with this. Remember, our audience is players, coaches, trainers, people in the athletic world, not just basketball, but people involved in athletics all over the place. Leave us today with this. You have to give a roughly 10 seconds waking thought. So anyone listening to the show, if every single morning or if tomorrow morning they would wake up, any person that's an athlete in this country would wake up and hear your voice, what message would you send people to hear first thing in the morning?
I would say put in the work when nobody's watching. So when all the eyes are on you, you'll be ready. That's what I would say, because that's what I've done through my career. Like I said, I've worked out in the barn. Nobody's here to see it. But when I put in the work, I know what the outcome's going to be. And then when nobody's watching and I'm making these mistakes and improving, the final product that gets put onto the floor is, basically a Picasso.
Yeah, that's so incredible. I love that. Finish on the Picasso. That's so good. Janelle, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been one of my favorite episodes, especially personally, being someone that I've looked up to for a while, and I really appreciate the insight and you taking the time to share these messages with the people watching.
Well, I'm glad you invited me. You can have me on any other time.
That's wonderful. All right. Really appreciate it. Take care, everybody. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you want to hear more from Janelle, she's got Twitter and Instagram. Her handles are at Janel McCarville. That's JANELMCCARVILLE. Janelle McCarville. This one was a lot of fun. I might even need to get Janelle back on the show once in a while as a regular guest. We'll see. Thank you all so much for listening and or watching. I hope you had your notebook out and wrote down a few things that'll help you improve your game or coaching style. Join us together to promote excellence. Make greatness cool again, man. Forget all the nonsense that's online right now. So many bad examples. So many things to distract you. Help us build this community of excellence. If you know somebody with that burning desire to succeed, that do whatever it takes attitude, share this show with them. This show can be found on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, all that. If you value your endeavor enough to want an update every time we post something, please subscribe and help us spread the MYC message. We're on all the social accounts at the MYC team. And hey, we're learning too. This is new for us. This is our adventure. So if you have any advice or comments, find us, let us know. We're always glad to hear from people in the Master Your Craft family. I'll tell you what, if anyone's watching this show or listening to this show, and you're buying into this idea, this message of excellence in athletics, in arete, and wanting to be the best you can possibly be and doing whatever it takes to accomplish that, I love you guys, man. It's people like you that make this world go around, and I really appreciate you listening to our show. This is Jacob Whalen. Go, master your craft.